From A Sound of Thunder by Ray Bradbury. Quote, "Stay on the path. Don't go off it. I repeat, don't go off for any reason. If you fall off, there's a penalty. And don't shoot any animal we don't okay." "Why?" asked Eccles. They sat in the ancient wilderness. Farbirds' cries blew on a wind, and the smell of tar and old salt sea, moist grasses, and flowers the color of blood. "We don't want to change the future. We don't belong here in the past. The government doesn't like us here. We have to pay big graft to keep our franchise. A time machine is finicky business. Not knowing it, we might kill an important animal, a small bird, a roach, a flower even, thus destroying an important link in a growing species." "That's not clear," said Eccles. "All right," Travis continued. "Say we accidentally kill one mouse here. That means all the future families of this one particular mouse are destroyed, right? Right. And all the families of the families of the families of that one mouse. With one stamp of your foot, you annihilate first one, then a dozen, then 1,000, 1,000,000, 1,000,000,000 possible mice." "So they're dead," said Eccles. "So what?" "So what?" Travis snorted quietly. "Well, what about the foxes that'll need those mice to survive? For want of 10 mice, a fox dies. For want of 10 foxes, a lion starves. For want of a lion, all manner of insects, vultures, infinite billions of life forms are thrown into chaos and destruction. Eventually, it all boils down to this. 59 million years later, a caveman, one of a dozen on the entire world, goes hunting wild boar or saber-toothed tiger for food. But you, friend, have stepped on all the tigers in that region by stepping on one single mouse. So the caveman starves. And the caveman, please note, is not just any expendable man. Oh no. He is an entire future nation. From his loins would have sprung 10 sons. From their loins, 100 sons. And thus onward to a civilization. Destroy this one man, and you destroy a race, a people, an entire history of life. It is comparable to slaying some of Adam's grandchildren. The stomp of your foot on one mouse could start an earthquake, the effects of which could shake our earth and destinies down through time to their very foundations. With the death of that one caveman, 1 billion others yet unborn are throttled in the womb. Perhaps Rome never rises on its 7 hills. Perhaps Europe is forever a dark forest, and only Asia waxes healthy and teeming. Step on a mouse and you crush the pyramids. Step on a mouse and you leave your print like a Grand Canyon across eternity. Queen Elizabeth might never have been born. Washington might not cross the Delaware. There might never be a United States at all. So be careful. Stay on the path. Never step off. End quote. In chaos theory, the butterfly effect is the sensitive dependence on initial conditions in which a small change in one state of a deterministic nonlinear system can result in large differences in a larger state. In other words, one little thing can change everything. I'm Holly.
I'm Leslie.
And we would be dead. Leslie.
Hey, Holly.
Hey, Beans. It's our 200th episode.
Oh my God, I forgot.
I know. Holy cow. Yeah, that didn't dawn on us until way too late.
Wow. Like last week.
Yeah. Exactly. We were just doing our work.
Yeah.
Just grinding the grind, making it happen.
Yeah, wow.
Then we're like, that's coming up. right
now.
now. It's right now. Yep.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
We should celebrate.
Yeah. We should have been celebrating.
We should have been celebrating, and we haven't been. God. But we have another landmark coming up,
we
too.
do. Our 5th year.
Our 5-year anniversary is
yes.
next week.
Yeah. So we can just next week sounds good.
We don't see anything coming. It just, everything's a surprise. So you know what?
We're still here?
What a good way to live.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I think we should do a live where we do like wine and sushi and hang out and talk stuff.
That sounds great to me.
Yeah, like a birthday party. Aw, we can have a birthday party.
Okay.
John, you got to come and make cupcakes.
Yes.
I nominate you.
Yes.
I give you a task.
Yes.
Terrible. We can make our own cupcakes, I guess.
Yeah, but it'd be better with him.
I know.
Maybe he can make the cupcakes and we can decorate them.
That's really cute. You're
That'd
in
be
full
so
mom mode right now.
I love it. I'll bring the bunny ears. It'll be great.
Love it. But I'm all things serious right now. All things serious. That's not how one speaks. But anyway, I'm very proud of us.
Yes.
That's a big accomplishment.
It really
200
is.
episodes in 5 years.
We've been like, yeah, we've kept up with it for 5 years.
How many other free podcasts stick it out for that long? Not all of them. I'll tell you that right now. So Leslie, I'd like to thank you for sticking with me in this crazy project.
Well, thank you for sticking with me.
Of course. And thank you to all of our patrons and our fiends in our community for creating such an amazing place and allowing us to do what we love week after week after week after week after week.
Yeah.
It's nice. We're going to keep doing it.
Yeah.
And this year we decided to kind of go back to our roots a little more and cover cases that feel interesting and important to us, despite what the newsreel and media circus might be shouting about. Boy, is it shouting a lot right now.
Lots of shouting.
Yeah, it's a stressful time to be alive.
Mm-hmm.
So we're just going to pick the things we like to talk about.
Yep.
To that end, today we will be covering our #1 most requested case. We have had more requests for this than anything else. The disappearance of Mark Himebaugh. Originally, I wanted to devote an entire independent podcast to Mark's disappearance. That was like one of my missions from when we bought microphones.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But after his story received a burst of media coverage in 2021 following the publication of the book Where's Mark by Detective Richard McHale, I decided that it wasn't the best idea for us to act at that point in time. I thought we should take a step back because there was a lot of conflicting opinions, and Mark's disappearance isn't a bandwagon, it's a tragedy. And this case isn't just close to home for us, it is in our home.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I waited those first couple years because I wanted to be better at podcasting, to be honest.
Makes sense.
So what am I talking about? On November 25th, 1991, Mark Himebaugh disappeared from the Sunray Beach neighborhood in Delhaven, New Jersey. Mark was just 11 years old at the time, and he has been missing ever since. For 10 years, I lived in Sunray Beach with Mark's neighbors and his mother. If you watch the People magazine documentary on Mark's case, which I just did recently, there are shots of my old house.
Yep.
Like, not just the roof from a distance, like my house.
Yeah.
And it was startling. I have roller skated down every street they show, and I can assure you that nobody who lives there has forgotten him, not for 1 minute. So much of what the general public knows of this case has been blended with theories over the years, though. Some of the suppositions made are very provocative, which makes for a good story. And our brains love a good story, don't they?
They sure do.
Yeah, that's what they're always looking for. And so we tend to lock on to something that is provocative without considering the burden of proof. It's a bad habit, but it's not entirely our fault. Humans get carried away easily.
Mm-hmm.
Silly little creatures.
We're so silly.
We just like to be thinking about stuff. Now, because this case is still unsolved, all I can really do is try to clearly separate theory from fact. And from there, you can form your own opinion. Today, my son is 11. He played where Mark played. He ran down Mark's street. He collected seashells and watched the horseshoe crabs come in every May on the spot where they found Mark's sneaker.
Yeah.
I say this because it profoundly affected me when I lived there, and it does still.
Yeah.
So yes, we're covering this case because you guys want it, but we're also covering it because when that meme circulates that asks, what's the one question you'd want answered in the afterlife? And everyone is tripping over each other to type, what happened to John Benet? My answer is always, Where is Mark? So, as you can imagine, I felt a little pressure to do a good job with this one.
Yeah.
It's like a lot of sleepless nights over here. And I fear it had left me looking, how shall I put this? Haggard,
Yeah.
hollow,
Yep.
pale, all of the above.
She looks rough.
It's rough. It's a bad time. You know that like still photo of Nosferatu that's kind of blurry?
Yeah.
That's what I look like.
Yeah.
Now, I've tried to bring a little color back into my cheeks, but nothing seemed to work. I guess I could go back to just like sleeping regularly and drinking water or attempt this mythological activity it's people call relaxing.
Yep.
That's how you say it, right?
Yeah.
Relaxing.
Relaxing.
Yep. That's what I think it is. It sounds weird, but
that's right.
It's right. But I'd rather try a super secret ingredient I've heard whispers about as of late.
Mm.
I've heard that all I need are just a few precious drops of
validation, a hill worth dying on.
If your name is Val, this week is for you.
Yeah.
It's a good one. And best of all, Leslie, our fiends can give us that precious ingredient totally free of charge.
How?
But how, you must be asking yourself? Well, I will tell you. Simply head on over to Spotify or Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star rating and or a friendly review. It really is the only way to move this podcast forward. Ratings and reviews equal attention, attention equals support, and support equals more and better content for all of you. Yeah, but if you just can't wait for more We Would Be Dead in your life, and who could blame you? Don't worry, you don't have to. You can support us over on Patreon. Woo! There, for just a few dollars a month, you will gain access to our entire catalog of 30-minute horror movies, our special mini-sodes, our weekly after show, Host Mortem, which is available in both video and audio formats. Maybe you want to see our faces. Maybe you don't. Both are okay, given how ghastly I just said I looked. You'll also get a special gift in the mail from us, the opportunity to participate in some giveaways, merch deals, and on-air toast dedicated just to you and more. Have more exclusive content in the works for you, our beloved patrons. But if you have anything you'd like to see, never hesitate to let us know. In all honesty, we are here thanks to our patrons, so come on over and be part of the We Would Be Dead family.
Come on over, baby.
Do it. And if all of that is a little bit too much for you, you can simply follow us on social media. We are at Would Be Dead Pod anywhere and everywhere you get your content. You can like our posts, share our posts, and share our posts.
Yes.
That's the best one. You can leave us a comment. Post about your favorite episode. Let us know when you're listening. Tell a friend. Tell a neighbor. Tell the old lady on the corner whose hoarding tendencies are so wild she had to build several sheds. What's her name?
Gloria.
That was fast and accurate. Good job. Then your friends and Gloria can become fiends and we can all hang out together. That Gloria, she's going to bring a lot of weird stuff.
Sure is.
Well, I think that's all I have in the way of news before we begin. Leslie, do you have anything else to add?
Well, I guess because it's our 200th.
Yeah.
No, I can't think of anything.
Right. Good. Okay. Wouldn't want to change things up.
No.
Just because it's a special day.
Yeah.
Got to keep it steady.
Sure, yeah.
All right, then.
I mean, why make this any longer than it already is?
Well, all right, then. On with the show. Cold weather is different when you live by the water. The wind, which isn't a visitor but a resident, makes things sharper, and the damp that penetrates every single dry corner gives the wind a speedy passage straight to your bones. The temperature may not be lower, but somehow the cold is colder. Monday, November 25th, 1991, was a cold day in Delhaven, New Jersey. The little neighborhood of Sunray Beach and its small population of year-round residents were preparing for Thanksgiving. The kids had just a couple of days of school left before a nice long weekend, because back then you went to school for most of November and then had a 4-day weekend for Thanksgiving. No school November is relatively new.
Mm-hmm.
And by 3 o'clock, the kids would tumble off the buses in little groups, bringing the quiet streets and backyards a little much-needed business in the few short hours before the streetlights came on and everyone had to go inside for dinner.
Yep.
It's the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
You're allowed to be outside until the streetlights come on.
Yes.
Some houses in the neighborhood were empty, waiting in suspended animation for vacation season to come back around again. This neighborhood particularly would have people that kind of stayed there for the whole summer. But I think at this point in time, there weren't a lot of houses that were like summer rentals. So it wasn't like you'd come and spend a week there. It was like, that's my summer home. Just to clarify. The off-season can have an eerie quality of the shore, don't you think?
Yeah, for sure.
If you've ever lived in a tourist town, then you know how jarring the drop in population can be. As soon as like October Fall Festival season is over, we lose like 3/4 of the population down here. November is a quiet time. The holidays glow bright in the near future, but they're not there quite yet, which makes the isolation more cozy than cavernous.
And it always depends on the actual weather. Like if it's warm November, then those people generally come down more often on the weekends.
You'll have weekenders, but not like on a Monday.
But if it's like cold or whatever, like nobody's here.
Nothing. This is the time of year, like January, February, March, that it's basically The Shining down here. There's just nobody. November, we still have a little bit, but yes. Now, normally I'd give you all a little more story before launching into details, but this case is different. It's incredibly hard to accurately represent any of the things we talk about happening, the ways in which people reacted to them, and just how few people would have had access to Mark under normal circumstances if you can't picture where it all occurred. Don't you think so?
Sure, yeah.
Don't you think a lot of the confusion in this case kind of comes from people not being able to really understand where it happened?
Yeah.
Because I really felt that. The location of this event and the unique and strange circumstances on the day it occurred are criminally misunderstood. And that can lead to assumptions that aren't helpful because misunderstanding things is not going to help further this case at all. So let's get into it. Delhaven is a small, unincorporated community in Middle Township, New Jersey. For those of you who have never been down here but know the annoying song, On the Way to Cape May. Middle is on the mainland in Cape May County and includes none of those famous beaches. Avalon, Stone Harbor, Wildwood, North Wildwood, and Victorian Cape May are all 10 minutes and a bridge away, but they're their own thing, mostly because they're all islands. Side note, is it weird to non-residents that New Jersey has a whole bunch of islands? I feel like nobody thinks of us as like an island community.
Right.
But we are.
We are. Just a bunch of islands.
Yeah, we have lots of islands and they have boardwalks and beaches, but Middle Township has Walmart and Home Goods.
Yeah.
Which if you live down here is very valuable. Delhaven isn't in the town part of Middle though, it's on the outskirts. Right on the border of Lower and Middle Townships, situated along the Delaware Bay. And yes, it's really hard to wrap your brain around it, but mainland Cape May is divided into Lower, Middle, and Upper Township.
Yeah.
I didn't even believe that was true when I first moved down here. I was like, that's like a nickname, right? Nope. Everybody here is so creative. I know. And what's worse is that when you enter these townships, there are signs that say things like, welcome to the township of Lower.
Right.
It's grammatically correct, but it sounds like an alien wrote it.
I guess I never thought about it.
They don't all have that. I think it's just Lower.
Yeah.
It says, welcome to the township of Lower.
You know what's really funny, though? I guess I didn't think about it much, like it being separated like that, because it does all feel like we're one.
Yeah, it does.
But we're broken up. It just feels like this is where the schools need to go.
Yep. No, yeah, for sure.
We're just evenly separated.
Absolutely. I digress. The thing about Sunray Beach is that it is the only section of Delhaven that isn't connected by local streets.
Right.
It's not connected to the rest of Delhaven at all. It's completely cut off from the rest of the town. Not only that, but if the rest of Delhaven, from which it is cut off by the lack of adjoining roads, is on like one side of Sunray Beach, then the other side of it is a large swath of protected marshland. Behind it is the Delaware Bay, and in front of it, across a major thoroughfare, which is the only way in or out of town, is a big park with just one entrance and exit on the street side. You can't go through the park to the other side to get anywhere. So essentially, Sunray Beach is an island. It's just a pocket. There's no way to get anywhere through it. It's an island of 5 streets. Sunray Road and Eldridge Avenue go the full 3 blocks from the highway to the bay. Delaware Avenue is a dead-end road. That's the one that traces the shoreline, and it stops after 3 blocks, ending in what looks like an endless expanse of marshland. It's just like reeds and grass as far as the eye can see. Rutledge Avenue starts on the highway and goes 2 blocks in before connecting to a cross street. There are only 2 of those, and they're very small. Pine Ave is the closest to the highway, followed by Oak. The Himebaughs lived on Sunray between Oak and the Bay, and I lived on Pine between Rutledge and Sunray. For those keeping score, it is a 1.5-block walk. Very close. The highway I spoke of is Bayshore Road. By the way that the title is road, you can guess that it's just like a 2-lane highway. It's not like a big one. It's like a thoroughfare. And right across it is Cape May Park South. So this is like a county-funded park. It's big and gated with a playground, basketball courts, soccer fields, and an outbuilding with bathrooms that no one ever used. Did you ever realize that was there? It was.
I did, but would never go in there.
I would have my kids there, like having to go to the bathroom, be like, we got to walk home. And I would never think that they were there. Whatever.
I just wouldn't use them.
They were actually really nice and very clean.
Oh.
Yes, they're very clean and very nice.
Nobody uses them.
I only ever went in them when I was by myself with my roller skates on, and it was fine. But anyway, if you're there, you can use them. They're nice. And also, it is mentioned several times in this case that the park has a guard. We will talk about him in part 2 because, surprise, this is a multi-part episode. But this is curious to me because the entire time I lived there, nobody guarded that park.
Just going to ask, is that still true?
No, there's nobody that like sits at the gate and like watches. There is no like guardhouse or anything. The park doesn't have someone standing there and patrolling.
But there is now?
No.
No, I mean then. Sorry.
Apparently.
Sorry. I brought myself back to 1991.
I feel you. I'm just getting in this. Apparently, like, I wonder if we're misunderstanding this and they're referring to like the patrolmen who would circle around, and I guess maybe at that time he would park in the lot for a little while.
Yeah.
But it sounds like a legitimate guard because they speak about him as like he knew all the kids. He saw everyone come and go. He knew this, that, and the other thing. But I've never seen anything like that happen there. Okay. And it's weird to me if they did have that and then Mark went missing and they stopped that.
That's what, yeah.
That's very bizarre.
Yeah.
So I don't really know what exactly the guard position entailed. Maybe I'll try and find out more for you guys next week. But
could be a funding thing too.
Maybe
now.
It could have been. But for our purposes, right now, that park in our mind has a guard.
Okay.
Which means nobody is snatching up kids in there. Like it's all pretty visible. It would be conspicuous, and which is important to know. The thing I'm trying to make clear about this place is that if you didn't have a reason to be in that neighborhood, you would never, ever go there.
Right.
Never.
Mm-mm.
And if anything happens on the one road that takes you in or out, like there's an accident or they put in city water, you're stuck until it's cleared. You can't go anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
I have missed whole functions because of accidents on Bayshore Road. You're just trapped.
Right.
That's it. And you might be thinking, what about the beach? There's a beach there, isn't there? People must come into the neighborhood for that. Well, this is another misconception. First, if you didn't turn into the Sunray Beach development and drive all the way to the water, you wouldn't really know the Bay Beaches were there. It's not like there's a sign or that they're anything you would advertise.
Yeah.
Second, I use the term beaches very loosely.
Sure, yeah.
It's used liberally in most publications, but like you guys don't know what we're talking about here. They are very muddy, very marshy, and they're a protected nature preserve beach.
Yeah.
So like when the shorebirds migrate, they're totally closed off. You can take a nice walk on them. I did that all the time. And at the right time of day, you can sit for a little while before the tide comes in and swallows the land nearly whole.
Right, right.
But you certainly can't swim or spend the day hanging out there.
No.
Not like you would on an ocean beach anyway.
There was the one time I took your daughter down there. We're like, we're going to have a nice little, I put out like a blanket. Yep. We were like going to hang out for a bit. And then there were just, those like sand spiders?
Yep.
There was a lot of them. Wasn't like one. There was a lot of them. And then like all of the, because that's also where not the
horseshoe crab migration?
Crabs. Yeah, they're like hatching there. Yep. But I just remember the spiders. And I remember sitting down and we were just having a lovely time. She was running back and forth in her little bucket cap. And then
love that bucket cap.
And then I just saw like a massive amount of these spiders. And in my head, I was just like, Delhaven. I just like, this is so gross.
Get in the wagon. Yeah, it's not. I totally, that's what I'm trying to say. Like, the water is almost always glassy still. And when it isn't, it gets angry and crashy.
Yeah.
It's never like just nice.
It's a nice view from a window.
Oh, it's a beautiful view from a window. But there's always dead fish around and so many bugs.
It smells.
Yeah. One time I found a huge dead turtle.
Oh.
And like you just said, the horseshoe crabs migrate there in the spring. And so it is littered with the ones that didn't make it.
Yeah.
It can be a smelly place in the summer.
Smelly. It's not relaxed.
No, it's not. It's very stressful. It's not relaxing at all. Nobody's setting up a blanket there. Yeah. But the sunsets are perfect. I'll give it that.
Yes.
You're only making the sacrifice to sit there, though, if you live there.
Yes. So, yeah.
It should also be noted that in November, because the tourists, summer locals, and snowbirds have all filtered themselves out, and the Christmas festivities in the area have yet to begin, the neighborhood is really limited only to faces you'd recognize if you lived there. Like, I could tell you, you probably could recognize everybody who lived there. Wasn't many. A stranger wandering around would not go unnoticed. And neither would a child being snatched up in broad daylight kicking and screaming.
Yeah.
Like, that's a pocket that's so small and isolated, and people are in it, you would notice that.
Yeah.
Maureen Himebaugh lived less than a block away from the bay in this little neighborhood with her two boys, 11-year-old Mark and slightly older Matthew. From what I have read, Matthew is a pretty private guy. He still lives in the area, and he's friends with people that I know. And he has always, always, always shown up for Mark and told his story faithfully. He's like a warrior for his brother's story. But as for personal details, we don't really need to include them when it comes to Matthew. Yeah. We'll just focus on Mark. Mark was an adorable little boy. If you're from the area, you have seen his photo almost as many times as you've seen your own. At 11 years old, he was 4'6" and 85 pounds. For a fifth grader, that's on the littler side, in case you don't have a reference. But he wouldn't have been like markedly short. He had bright copper penny red hair, often styled in the classic 90s bowl cut. If you know, you know.
Oh, yeah.
It was like the 90s bowl cut, yeah. Just to a T. He had blue eyes and a sharp little elfin nose that sat right in the middle of a constellation of freckles. He looked like Ron Howard when he was on the Andy Griffith Show. Yeah. Or, if you're too young for that reference, he looked like a combination of Ron Weasley and Seamus Finnegan. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I can see...
And if you're too young for that reference?
Get out of here. You shouldn't be listening to this podcast. Also, I can see his mom's face in Mark's, too. The kind eyes and gentle closed mouth smile. A lot of times when I see interviews with Maureen, I'm like, oh, like I can see it. Yeah. Maureen and her husband, the boys' father, Jody, had recently separated, but he remained a presence in the boys' lives. He had an apartment not far from their house, so his apartment was in Cape May proper, and they would visit on the weekends and planned longer visits in the summer. Things were pretty well sorted out. This is the 90s, not the 50s. Divorces happened. That was life. So the day in question passed quietly for a while. Kids went off to school, grown-ups went to work, stay-at-home parents stayed at home and parented, pushing their young kids on the swings at the park. A police officer did his daily patrol through the area and reported that nothing was going on.
All was well.
All was well at this point, correct. Mark's bus arrived on time as usual, and he made his way home. Matthew would be arriving later. In some reports, it says that he had something to do after school that day, so he didn't come home until a little bit later, and then he went to a friend's house. Good for him. Also, the boys attended two different schools and were in different grades, so their schedules weren't the same.
Okay.
Mark went to the special services school, and I want to be very careful discussing this because when I read his diagnosis, I felt immediately protective of him. He was diagnosed with, in all sources, it says OCD, and in some sources, I've read ADHD as well, which, I mean, I would absolutely believe. Simply because I have seen these diagnoses and I know them intimately because it's what my son has. But that's just the way things look from where I'm sitting. Just like if they were like, oh yeah, he did have ADHD, I'd be like, oh, I'm not surprised. And this really just means that he liked things a particular way. Kids with this combination of diagnoses usually have a hard time focusing sometimes, but they can be very bright and creative and, you know, have bursts of fun energy. But a break from routine or disruption in their process can be hard. And for Mark, it would make him defiant, frustrated, or downright angry, which, I mean, like, I have seen this. I know what it looks like. My son's ADHD, OCD will manifest similarly at times, but it only really happens at home. And nowadays, parents have far more information available to us.
Right.
So, like, we know what's going on. But in 1991, you didn't really know why your child was so upset or why they would get they would have meltdowns or feel frustrated. You just were like, I'm trying to discipline them and make their life as structured as possible. I don't know what to do.
Right.
So, as I said, Mark's differences would come out at school, which can be harder to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
So, public school at this point in time was less equipped to give him the learning environment he needed in a mainstream fashion. And Mark was not profoundly disturbed, and he didn't have compromised intelligence. Developmentally, he was pretty on track, which means he didn't need like the special education classroom.
Yeah.
He communicated perfectly well and played with other kids his age. Some coverage of this case I've read gives the illusion that he was disabled. Did you read any of those?
Yes. That's what I thought that he was. And didn't know that, then thought that he was. And then when I did a little bit, just a tiny little search, I was like, oh, he wasn't, he was fine. He was normal. He was
For a little while, it was very popular to make him out to be like the local kid with disabilities, the kid that was like mentally incapacitated and someone got him because he didn't know any better and was wandering around. That's not it.
Yeah.
That is not it. I don't know that line of thinking is still popular, but there was a time when telling the story involved that, and I didn't like it.
Because they made it sound like he could not be left alone.
Yeah.
How it sounded.
Yeah. Some retellings make like parts of the story sound as though his parents were irresponsible.
Right.
That's not true. That I don't think you could, if you met this kid, I don't think you would refer to him as disturbed or disabled necessarily. Mm-hmm. If you're his teacher, you might be like, well, he's got some problems. But again, he took Prozac, which is still the exact standard of care for moderate to severe childhood OCD. And some sources say he also took a stimulant, which would have been Ritalin at that time, but that does not appear to be confirmed. And honestly, even if he did, it wouldn't do anything drastic. And it is also right within the standard of care. These meds are not like life-saving medication either. They didn't alter his personality or keep him breathing or treat a physical disorder or make it so he could, function on a day-to-day basis. Mm-hmm. They just make it so he could focus on his own life and be less frustrated. From what I can see, he did very well at the special services school and was pretty beloved by his teachers.
Okay.
He had outbursts, but, they were working with it. Mark was kind, curious, and sensitive. Maureen called him her little curious George. Oh, I know. He had lots of neighborhood friends. He engaged in all the local activities and events and parades. He went trick-or-treating and rode bikes around the neighborhood. So as fifth graders go, this is a pretty well-known kid in the community.
Yeah.
By the time Mark made it home on the day in question, a bit of commotion had begun. Smoke curled up in the sky from the direction of the marshland that separated Delhaven and Lower Township. So that end of the Delaware Bay Street where it looks off into marsh, it was on fire. Part of it. Now, this is a very strange occurrence because we're not talking about the Pine Barrens where fires are common. This is a marsh. Marshlands are wet and muddy. The reeds and cattails are dry and brown at the top, but at that point of year, but they're essentially sitting in water. So it's not exactly easy for a blaze to catch and travel very far. The grass and weeds on the shoreline would also be dried out, but the general humidity and advancing tide really doesn't make it hospitable for a fire. But on this day, all of the conditions just kind of lined up right. Again, as I mentioned, this is unusual.
Right.
So unusual that no one would be prepared for it.
Mm-hmm.
At 11 years old, as most boys would, Mark peered out the window at the fire and decided he needed to get a better look. Honestly, I am a 43-year-old woman, and I'd be like, I need to go look at that.
Right.
If there was like a fire, I'd be looking at it.
We going.
Yeah, let's go look at that. But first, he changed into an old pair of sneakers because it could get muddy down there, which is true. It was very gross and muddy down there. And he knew his mom wouldn't want him to ruin his school shoes. So that is, God, my children never have that kind of forethought. They'd be like, I'm going to ruin all my shit. Bye. Oh, so that's very appreciated. He wore a blue USN sweatshirt, gray Dockers, and a gray jacket with red, blue, and gray plaid lining in the 4 outer pockets. I feel like every little boy had that jacket at one point. Yeah. Like, I can see it. It should also be noted that Mark had fractured his left foot recently, and he had just been cleared to walk without a boot. So he had a cast for like a week and a crutch for a week, and then he was in a boot for a while, and he just had that taken off. But the foot was still pretty weak and would get swollen and sore when he walked on it a lot. So sometimes keeping a shoe on it was uncomfortable for him. Mm-hmm. So as he's getting ready, suited up, go look at the fire, there's a knock at the door. Also probably a little weird. Knock at the door in the middle of the day, but I don't know. Maybe they got knocks all the time. A neighbor.
1991.
That's right. People were knocking on doors. Ladies had to write their correspondence in the afternoon.
That's right.
On this day, a neighbor had come by to ask Maureen for a ride to a local mechanic shop to pick up her car. I think we probably went to this one. The auto body shop was very close by. This would have been like a 10-minute round trip max. It was over the causeway into Lower Township. So through that area of the marsh, not through it, but like over the causeway that goes past it. Maureen agreed and thought about asking Mark if he wanted to go with them, but she knew that he was all like suited up and really wanted to go look at that fire. Fire trucks had started gathering on Delaware Avenue, also very uncommon. So she figured there would be other kids running down there at the same time as Mark, and he probably wanted to be with everybody. He often spent his days like any 90s kid, unsupervised, playing in a crowd of children. That's just what every kid did. And bouncing from house to house, poking around with things on the beach. The neighborhood was its own village at that point, and parents looked out for all the kids as if they were their own. So this is not weird for her to go, I'm going to be gone for 10 minutes. Go hang out. It's fine. I cannot stress this enough. This is not an irresponsible decision. So just saying that for the record. And also, Maureen thought she was going to be gone for 10 minutes. It didn't end up being that way, though. Maureen walked to the car with her neighbor, then looked at Mark, who had come out into the front yard in his winter coat. As she was getting into her driver's seat, she told him that she'd be right back. And he said, okay, Mom. Then she closed the door and drove away. And she never saw her son again.
Ugh.
Oh, that's sinking.
It just is awful.
It is so profoundly awful. I can't even imagine dealing with any of that. Why would you ever think something awful was going to happen? What a mundane day.
Right.
The trip to the auto body shop was quick and painless, just down the road over the marsh into Lower Township. But by the time Maureen was driving back home, the marsh fire had gotten rather large, and police had blocked traffic in the other direction from going over the causeway. To do this, they had to reroute traffic through Sunray Beach, using the neighborhood as a makeshift U-turn. But because it's a pocket, it's easy to make that just a turnaround. Remember, there was no through this neighborhood. You could only turn around or avoid a couple blocks of Bayshore Road. Suddenly, the very quiet neighborhood was filled with cars and fire trucks. We barely got the attention of Mr. Softy. Seeing a ton of traffic moving through that place would have been wild. Maureen's little 10-minute trip ended up taking over a half an hour. She wasn't really worried, though. Maureen got back home eventually, walked through the door to an empty house, and she figured the fire must have been pretty interesting. Matthew, who had been at a neighborhood friend's house, made his way home shortly after. Some reports say Maureen picked him up, and some say he just came home. It doesn't really matter. She asked him if Mark was with him or he had run into him, and he said no. The other kids that she saw hadn't seen him either, which felt strange. By 5 o'clock, when Mark still hadn't arrived home, worry began to set in. This is like dinner time is approaching. It was nearly dark because November is quick dark time. The fire seemed to be getting under control, and all the other kids had gone inside. Maureen and Matthew called around to their local friends and checked the beach and other local spots where Mark usually would have passed the time, but he was nowhere to be found. And when Violet was 7, she wanted to walk to the beach by herself to get some sand. She did that, and a few minutes too many passed, so I started walking down that way with Flynn. And I got to that beach and she was gone.
Ugh.
I was screaming like something had ripped my heart out of my chest. She had just looped around and took another street and took her time cutting through backyards to get home, something she had never done before in her life. But I screamed and cried like I've never screamed and cried before because I thought that she had disappeared.
Right.
So this is like, I'm like, I feel like I'm going to throw up right now talking about this.
Yeah.
So at this point, Maureen called the damn cops like any of us would.
Yep.
And Matthew called his dad to let him know what was going on. Now, a lot of people who cover Mark's case love to make a big deal about this next bit, which I think is a mistake and a red herring. This one little piece isn't the problem you might think it is, so let us explain. Jody Himebaugh was performing that night in his barbershop quartet at Elaine's Dinner Theater, and if that name is familiar, it's because I worked there for a very long time. Matthew called Elaine's to let his father know that Mark was missing, and the story goes like this. Jody popped off stage to take the call. Then he went back on stage and did a few more songs, scoobity-bop-bop-bop, and then left when he had finished as much as he wanted to, or, when he felt like it. It is insinuated that he thought performing was more important than his son, and maybe he did, but this is not a defining moment for that. Also, it has been said, with a certain author's full chest, that because this man was singing at a theater, he was probably gay and secretly there to have sex with other men. It is 2025. Are you all the way kidding me?
Right.
Men who perform are not by virtue of this fact gay and always cruising. That's not it.
Mm-hmm.
That is a crazy rumor to just print like it's a fact, and whether I believe the book's theories or not, notwithstanding, throwing around casual, bigoted assertions like this waters down any legitimate theories considerably. Here's the thing, you guys. I don't know Jody Himebaugh. He could be the best man in the world. He could also be the worst man in the world. I simply don't know. But what I do know is Elaine's. So I know that it did not go down like that.
Yeah.
They simply aren't that responsible, just to put it bluntly. I also know another member of that barbershop quartet. I worked at Elaine's for 13 years, and the incredibly conservative owners and management who are on premise every single night would never, ever, never, not one time have allowed it to be a place where gay men meet up to find sex.
Right.
That's
right.
Nuts. The thought of that is nuts. I hired gay men. They felt awkward a lot of the times. It's just not what they made it out to be. And Jody also has a pretty darn loud conservative presence on social media as well. Of course I looked. Come on, you guys. Like, what do you think this is? Amateur hour? I highly doubt that someone with as many conservative posts as this man has available on his public profile would be in a public place engaging in a homosexual activity.
Right. It would all be private.
If it happened, who knows? You're right. It would be behind like 6 closed doors, not at the bar in a local place with a ton of people. That's nuts. But I digress.
Unless he's trying to hide in plain sight. I don't know.
That would be the worst way possible to hide. Sure. Like, I'm going to perform. Come here, audience.
Yeah. It's okay. I'm performing.
This is just a performance, even when I'm off stage. Don't shush. Also, like, this is a a network of the world's tiniest towns. If you were seen doing that, everyone would know in 45 seconds.
Yeah.
One guy wouldn't know. Every guy would know.
Yeah. Some ones would have come forward.
So, like, I know someone that was there. Right. And he was like, no. It was not a bunch of guys fucking. It was a barbershop quartet.
Very masculine.
Yeah. Just like old-timey straw hats, barbershop. I don't know. Anyway.
Yeah, having fun.
Mm-hmm. So, logistics.
Yeah.
At this time, the owner, bartender, and layout of the building were exactly the same as they were when I started working there in 2004. There was a phone at the front desk, a phone at the office right behind it, and a phone behind the bar. The stage and the dining room were through the bar behind a closed door. At one time, back when the theater was a ballroom, there was a phone in that room. But this was not that time. When a call came in for a performer, if it did, while they were on stage, the front desk or bartender would take a message and relay it to them when they got off stage, if they were lucky.
Right.
No exceptions. The phone call would have to be like, you are on fire at this moment, for them to go in and tell them that anything had happened. That's just not happening. This meant that after a set, Jody would have to have been told by the receptionist or the bartender that he needed to call home. And after such a time, he would have either left or completed the night's performance. It appears that he did the latter. But there is no way he was pulled off stage mid-set to answer a phone and then said, you know what? I'm going to get in a few more tunes before I go. And I think I've already established the fact that there was no way he was just like hanging out to get some gay strange. That's pretty far-fetched.
Yeah.
Maybe not in general, but not in that location. Moving on. This is also a barbershop quartet, not AC/DC. Do you know how long their sets are? In my experience, not long.
Right.
Maybe a half hour. And a quartet means 4. There are 4 singers, no backups. If one of them leaves, they're done singing for the night. All of them. And Leslie, you had a little bit of an input on this too, right? As a career musician's wife.
Yeah. So my initial feeling was, depending on how the information was relayed, if it was kind of like also thinking about the fact that Jody does not live.
Right. He doesn't live with them anymore.
Doesn't live with them. So obviously it's still his kids. It's still important. But just the idea of if he's getting just information that's just like, hey, Mark hasn't come home, or your kid just hasn't, like, we're out looking for him. And if it was just kind of like a, we're looking around, we'll keep you posted kind of thing, then it's like, okay, we have a couple songs left. Let me just finish out the night.
Sure.
And also the distance too, like how far away they are from the gig or from the house.
13 minutes door to door. 11 was my old house. 13 was Delhaven.
Also, okay. And also because you have, like you said, it's a group. So if one person leaves, then all of them have to stop.
If they are collecting a paycheck, which I don't know if they were or not, they would all lose that paycheck.
They would all lose that paycheck. Exactly. Also, I don't know, at the time, the vibe of management there, but they could also lose a gig.
They would.
A full-on gig. And maybe it was an understanding.
They might not have lost it in the future. However, they would not have paid them for that night.
Right. So with just thinking about some of those things, it's like if it wasn't, it really depends on what was told to him. Because if it was as simple as like, hey, Mark hasn't come home yet, but we're looking for him. Yeah. And depending on like the actual time of it, if it just didn't feel urgent, I could see how, he goes back on and finishes 3 songs and then heads out immediately. It makes sense to me. But if it was a lot different, like if it was, like it also depends on where in the investigation they were going, what, how the mom was feeling, who called. There were just so many variations to this.
And the reason we're making such a big deal of this tiny thing is that other coverage of this case tends to think that a lot hinges on this moment. And I just don't think it's true. Yeah. I don't think necessarily that like he is scot-free, never did a bad thing in his life. Sure. I just think this is the wrong moment to focus on.
Yeah. And my other thing is that there were 3 other people there.
Yeah.
And they were aware of what was going on.
And the one I know is Dad.
If the information was relayed in a very serious manner, then all of them would have been like, we got to go.
Yeah, for sure.
That's just my feeling about, like, that's what I would assume.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think so too.
So.
Yeah. So, but my best guess as to what actually happened is that the quartet finished a set, the bartender or receptionist had Jody call home, and he either misunderstood the urgency of the situation, like you said, or figured that somebody else was handling it well enough at the moment so he could finish his gig and maybe or maybe not get paid, or just not let down his buddies, or just finish singing because he liked singing. I don't know. I don't know if they're paid gigs or not, whatever. But if they were, it would have also been important to Jody because he suddenly had rent and probably child support to pay, and he worked at a local print shop, which is not like incredibly lucrative. So money's money. I do know that once the quartet finished, he did go help to search. And I know this for sure because my friend went with him. These are not excuses for Jody. Again, this is just a clarification. Would I have made the same choices? No, absolutely not. I would have run out the door as fast as I can from that theater screaming.
Right.
13 minutes door to door, going the speed limit, as I said, from Elaine's to Sunray Beach, I would have made it in 10. Draw any conclusions you like from those facts. Just keep your eye on the prize. So at this point, neighbors, family, friends, and their neighbors and family and friends came out in droves to help look for Mark. There were like hundreds of people looking for him very quickly. Word had gotten around fast. Police first checked around on foot and in patrol cars, thinking he was probably hiding out somewhere like kids do. So if we think back to the Megan Kenka case, you remember that police say, like, the first thing they tell you to do is, or they do, is they look in like crawl spaces and basements and in little cubbies because kids like to hide in a little spot. So usually if you can't find them, that's where they are. So though there were tons of people out looking, Mark's father did not arrive right away as discussed. And police did find it weird. They were like, where's his dad? Why isn't it here? And they made note of it. It would not come back around till the next day, though. They didn't have time to stop and talk at this point because they knew in the back of their minds that every minute that ticked by, the chances of finding Mark alive were lower and lower. It was getting cold and dark. Within 2 hours, police had called in canine search units and helicopters searching the marsh. At this time, one of their main theories was that Mark had wandered out onto the marsh itself to get a better look at the fire, or gone out onto the muddy beach after dark at low tide and got stranded or stuck. Maybe he'd gotten hurt and couldn't walk back home. He did have a hurt foot. This is also a prevailing theory in the Delphi case at first. This is a very common line of thinking with kids that are in nature. They're like, well, they probably broke an ankle or fell down or they're stuck somewhere. We just have to find them. There are a few problems with that, though. First, as a kid who lived in that neighborhood and knew it like the back of his hand, I cannot imagine Mark wandering out into the mud or the marsh.
Right.
The unstable mud, which is a lot like shallow quicksand, is only uncovered during low tide. You have to walk out towards the water a ways to really get to large patches of it that will like suck you down. And it's also often a darker color than the rest of the sand. So if you're familiar with it, you can usually avoid the worst of it. It also isn't strong enough to swallow anybody whole. You can lose a shoe for sure, or have a hard time pulling your foot out. But if that were the case with Mark, he would have been found right away because he would have started screaming.
Right.
It's like a panic moment. You can't move. You can't stop yourself. And there is nothing else on that beach. They would have found him immediately. It would have just been some kid stuck in the mud, waving his hands. Furthermore, if the tide had come in and he had been like anchored in spot and drowned, which seems very unconventional, he would have either stayed right in that same spot and been uncovered when the tide came back out, or floated to the top and washed ashore. The water is more like a sound at that part of the bay. It's very, very shallow for a very, very long time. So if you drown in that shallow water, you're not going out to sea super far. You're just staying kind of local. The other thing is, like, there were firefighters by the fire. Why would they let a kid walk out onto the marsh? Anyway.
And there were other people there. Like,
yeah, people were like walking their dog and like looking at the fire and looking out their windows and stuff. It's not, if they saw a kid like dangerously wandering out towards a fire, people would have been like, hey kid, get out of there. Furthermore, there's no two ways about it. If he was trapped somewhere, he would be screaming. I lost a running shoe in the mud when I first moved in there, and it was terrifying because it feels like the wet ground is trying to eat your foot. And if I hadn't wiggled my way out rather quickly, I would have been screaming too. And Mark and I are almost the exact same age now, so same thing. He saw The Neverending Story. He was definitely scared of quicksand.
Yes, that is, yeah.
We all knew. We all knew that meant certain death, so there's no way.
I just wondered, like, do other generations just not have that fear?
No,
is
they
that
don't.
just a millennial thing?
And it was The Neverending Story's fault almost, and cartoons, but a lot of it was The Neverending Story.
I also remember us talking about it in school, and like,
nobody cares about it now.
Like sinkholes and quicksand. I just thought I was going to be seeing a lot more.
Yeah, John Mulaney was right. I thought quicksand was going to be a bigger problem.
Yeah.
But Mark is my age. If in some way he is still wandering the earth, he is 44.
Right.
So he has the same cultural references as a kid as we would.
Yeah.
Quicksand would have been scary.
Yeah.
He would have been like, this is it.
This is it.
Get me. Our tags. It would have been awful. And people live in those waterfront houses, and they would have heard him and run outside, as would the firefighters.
Yes.
The marsh proper, where the fire itself is burning, also is just tall, sharp reeds. It's all like cattails and phragmite. It's not easy to get onto that. Though I suppose if you managed to do it, it would be hard to get back out. Still, though, wandering out far enough to get stranded and possibly drown without making a sound seems very unlikely. Duck hunters are the only people I've seen go out there, and they do it all the time, but they're in hip waders, and they have like stuff to get through. November is also duck season, actually. I know this because it is when I would be startled by gunshots at sunrise and sunset on a daily basis. You remember that?
I do.
It was horrible and startling. But I don't think they would have been out, because that's a few straggly people have that theory too. They're like, well, what if he caught a stray bullet from a duck hunter? He was out on the marsh, they were hunting, and something happened. I don't think they were out during the fire.
Right.
And from what I heard, and I don't know this for sure, it is not legal for a lot of people to hunt there. You need like a special permit or something. And even then it's like really limited. So you wouldn't, if you saw cops wandering around out there, probably wouldn't be grabbing your rifle and going out to hunt ducks.
Yeah.
That's a random theory. Nonetheless, I don't think any of that would have been happening with the fire that day. At this point, there was a break in the case, though, or a hint in the search, I should say, because it's not a case yet. A discovery was made. A searcher hollered to the crowd that he had found something. Feeling hopeful, they all ran to meet up, and the item had been turned over to a police officer. It was a single sneaker, which I think is haunting. The searcher had discovered it in the sand up on, like, not all the way in the dune, because there really isn't much of a dune, like by the grass up toward the entrance of the beach. But it was just like on the beach.
Oh, just there?
Yeah. It wasn't like buried or like in the grass. It was just on the beach.
So how long would it, like if you were going to search that area, how long would it have taken to get to that shoe?
No time at all.
No time. Like you would have just been like, okay, we're going to go search here. And then you'd be like, oh, shoe.
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah.
Okay.
Because it was like right. Okay. So like this is going to be relevant to maybe like just you. But so you're on Delaware Bay Ave. You come down the end of, my street it would have been Sunray. So like before it turns into like the expanse where there's no cross streets on the end, there was a mark on the street and it said Mark and there's a circle.
Okay.
And like right in that way, like towards the beach, on the beach, that's where they found his sneaker. So it wasn't that far in. There was a beach outlet just like probably 10 yards away. So it was close.
Okay.
I know that's relevant to probably just Leslie, but I needed her to see it in her mind. So the person had discovered it just sitting on the beach. It was a sneaker. It was white, black, and gray and red, an LA Gear shoe. The shoe was worn and dirty, and detectives showed it to Maureen and Matthew, and it was 100% Mark's shoe. The sneaker had once belonged to Matthew. It was a hand-me-down. It was one of the shoes he had put on earlier to go outside and explore. A lot of people also make a big to-do over the fact that Maureen says it was a hand-me-down. Like, that's judgy. Why are you... No, it's the shoes that he put on to go outside and play.
Right.
And it's relevant because Matthew double recognized them because they were his.
Right. Also, I think that's right. He would recognize it. Like they'd be able to fully confirm that these are our shoes. But then also because I know, and maybe we'll talk about this later, but so I'll just make a point of it. I know that they test the shoes for the particular...
The wear pattern.
Yep. But I also think that that's important to know that Matthew had them first.
Yeah, both of them wore them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but, they confirm that it is Mark's shoe. And they only ever found one. Just the left one. Yep. Which corresponded with the foot Mark had previously broken. At this point, a lot of people searching and family theorized that he may have taken it off while he was on the beach because it was bothering his swollen foot. And if you're on the beach, like a lot of people are shoeless on the beach. So that kind of makes sense. But this discovery was curious because if it was just laying on the beach the whole time and people had been searching for at least 2 hours and the beach was the first place they looked, wouldn't they have found it right away?
Yeah. Yeah, this is what I think is so strange.
Well, there's a lot of people think it wasn't there right away.
Okay.
Maybe they just missed it though. At this point, they can't be like, They're like, okay, well, maybe we didn't see it. Maybe I don't know. But it's a clue that we have to stick to. He was at this beach at some point in time. And that must have felt either hopeful or totally damning. My mind would have been racing. I'm like, is he dead and that's why it's there? Did he take it off? What's happening? Why is it just the shoe? Police, canines, helicopters, and neighbors all searched alongside everyone in the community until about 1:30 a.m. At this point, the temperature had dipped below freezing and there was no sign of Mark anywhere. Police speculated that at this point, Mark could be embarrassed because he had caused so much trouble and he didn't want to come out of his hiding place while everyone was looking for him. They figured that it would be best to stop for the night and come back in the morning. And if I were Mark's mother, I would figure that they needed a punch in the jaw and another in the morning. Are you kidding me? They left? But they didn't find him and it was dark and cold.
Right.
This happens in the Delphi case too. At a certain hour, they're like, we got to go in for the night. We'll be back in the morning. And they're like, are you kidding me?
Like, isn't there a changeover? Bring in the changeover.
Yeah. Who's the next shift?
Yeah.
He might be embarrassed. Get out of here. No, he's not going to want to die. Ugh. What if he was hurt like they expected? What if he was scared or in some kind of trouble? What if he was injured or stuck in mud? Then they're just going to be like, we'll get you in the morning, kid. That's a bad plan.
Right.
It was freezing. He would not have survived out there, especially if he was wet. And at that point, they were leaning heavily on the theory that he was, in fact, outside somewhere. Maureen says that she kind of really had a feeling at that point that someone had taken him. She kept saying, like, what if somebody grabbed him? What if somebody grabbed him? But cops were not giving that credence yet. But I think we all kind of feel that way. Who wouldn't? And the rest of the searchers stayed out all night and searched in shifts. That's the shifts. The shifts are coming in there with flashlights calling Mark's name and leaving no stone or yard unturned. But nothing turned up. When the police arrived the next morning, things seemed to turn from search to investigation. And that is where we will pick up in part 2.
Ooh.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So that's like the 0 hour. That is day 1. Yeah. Then after that, things kind of like stretch into a police investigation, and we'll talk about, like all the theories and the different people that were suspected. Because there's a lot of people that were looked at, some for very good reason and some for absolutely no good reason at all whatsoever.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I'm going to be interested to hear next week.
Yeah. And I'm hoping this is 2 parts, but on the off chance that it's a lot, maybe you guys will get 3. We'll see.
Okay.
So anyway.
Okay, before we close out, just because, again, this will be for next week when they, I guess probably when they do question mark stat.
They will. Yeah.
They will.
Well, we can talk about it a little bit if you want. I'll list the facts next week.
I just wanted to know, did we have like the times of things for him? Like when he got the call at Elaine's, when he got to the house at...
I don't think we have precise times for them. I think that the call at Elaine's was probably, cops were called around 5. So it was probably around like 6 or 7 is usually the timeline most people give. Because like, I don't think they called him right away. I think they started looking a little bit and then they were like, okay, well, we better call him.
Right.
But I'll double check it for next week. Okay. And then I think like a few hours after that is when he arrived. Because they were like, everything just says he sang a few more songs before he left. I'm like, what does that mean?
Right.
And then every other account is like, well, he came late and then he was like, hung around for a little while. And then when the cops left, he didn't stay all night either. Like when the cops left and it got late, he left.
Right.
And then, the next, to bleed into tomorrow a little, not tomorrow for all of you guys, but the next part a little bit, he is not there the next morning either. And the cops are like, okay, where is Dad?
Right.
This is very odd.
Yeah. And I would say, I think we talked about it where it's like, it feels like one of those situations, like sleep on the couch. Like, why are you leaving?
Or in your car
or in your car or something. But that's also where it's like, I don't fully know their, like, Jody and Maureen's relationship.
Yeah, me neither.
Like, based off of the information that we have, it doesn't, like, they definitely didn't end great.
No, it was kind of volatile.
So it's like, so there's that vibe,
He was accused of some pretty heinous stuff. We'll get to that in the second part because there's a lot to talk about there.
Yeah. So, which is also like, that's why I just think the situation at Elaine's, like him getting the information. Also, it was the son that called a young, like teen, like a early teen,
exactly,
calling, giving the information. And then, like you said, I also was thinking about that more because I was like, we live in the day of cell phones, but John wouldn't have checked a cell phone. I would have had to figure out how to get, call the place of, like, wherever he's working. And then, like you said, hope that they, like, tell him if he's on stage. But also, if it was that serious and, like, I was calling or even had, like, my son call at the time, like, I would have had to be like, you stay on the phone till they get there. Like, you
I would have someone go there.
Right. I would have sent...
It is not far away. And it kind of, to me, is indicative of how tenuous his relationship with everyone was, that nobody was like, I got to go to Elaine's and get him.
Yeah, I would have sent the neighbor to go get him.
Anybody. Just like drive down to Elaine's, make sure you get him.
I would have been like, can you...
Yes. Send a cruiser. Like one of the cops, go by.
Go get him.
Yeah. Yeah. But that didn't happen.
Yeah.
And that's, again, this is not indicative
of... one of the wives of the other...
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, there were things. So that's why I feel like there's so many little pieces that to me, it doesn't necessarily seem weird. But also I think that one of our sources is the, is it People Magazine? Yeah. People Magazine. So in the, like, documentary that they did, they show, like, a interview of his dad and they, like, question him about his time. Like, you didn't get there. Why did you stay?
Yeah.
And now, like, thinking back to how he was answering them, because he got very, like, defensive, but, like, irritated.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, because, and he's just like, I win as soon as well, once we were done, like, I got there. I left and went straight there. But it makes sense to me if it's, because they make it sound like they called multiple times. And he was like.
And this does not free him from any kind of other misdoings. I just think that it sets it up.
It does. It just sets him up immediately. Like when you hear it anywhere else, I just felt like, oh,
yeah,
he has something to do with it.
He's involved in this in some way. But I
think, and he still could be. I don't know. But it's just, like you said, he could be a great guy. He could be a terrible guy. We don't know him. But I just think that there's that initial, like right away, at any time I've heard this case, just initially you're just like, oh, he had something to do with it.
It incriminates him right away.
I feel like it's fair. Like after, I feel like we can't do that. Like
I am not comfortable saying that at all.
Yeah.
I am not comfortable perpetuating any of those theories because I don't have concrete evidence of a single thing. And the fact of the matter is the FBI and the Middle Township Police have not gone after that man.
Right.
And if he was that obviously someone who had done something awful, they would have. And they did not question him beyond like day 3.
Right.
So, I mean, again, we'll get more into this in the next because it just leads into so many other things that I kind of wanted to make a cleaner break so that when I launch into it, I didn't have to break that up at all.
Right.
But like, yeah, I think if you're gonna cast an eye on him, it should be from the right place. And if you end up thinking that,
which is fine.
That's fine. You just have to make sure that you're doing it with the appropriate amount of information.
And I just think because we finally get to tell this story that it's like, I'm glad that we are not starting it that way,
Yeah,
like,
well, me too. And his family has reacted, rightly so, furiously about those theories about him being published. It's something that they were not really aware were happening, and they were extremely upset by, including his older son, who did not like any of that. So I'm not inclined to be like, I believe all of these things.
Right.
Because I don't find that fair.
We're going to bring up so much more information next week. So
yeah, but everything about him did not appear in the news media until the publication of this book.
Oh.
It all started with this book. Before that, I can't find an article he was brought up in with people looking sideways at him.
Right.
Does it mean that that's false? No, but it also doesn't mean that it's true, and I can't source it.
I gotcha.
So like,
when did oh yeah, because
the book was published in 2022.
And when was the People's Magazine?
I think that was around the same time. Everything happened around the same time.
Right, because they referenced that book.
Yeah, so it was
like, lightly.
There was a media firestorm when that book was published. I mean, they were on podcasts. It was on People. It was on ID. The case went everywhere, which is great for them to put Mark's face out there more and to tell his story. That's the point. However, I think some people go a little wild with information they think an audience is going to be super interested in. And so they push that instead of the whole picture.
Yeah.
So I really want to stress that, like, I don't know if it's wrong.
Right.
But I don't know that it's right.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think the way you said it is how I feel.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's just having the whole picture.
And which
is when I listen to this case, I always have like 1,000 more questions. So getting some of that information like nailed down and like a little bit more broken up in my brain, I'm like, oh, okay, this literally could be an awful thing, or it could just be nothing.
Yeah, and I just think you have to be armed with information. And I just see like Maureen's sweet little face in my head, like out on her front step planting her flowers and stuff. And I'm like, I can't like mess with this woman. This is awful.
Right.
We don't get paid for this. This is not something that we are like getting a ton of money from or trying to be famous from. We just tell stories, man. We tell stories to our little audience. That's what we do. And no part of me could hurt these people. That doesn't exist inside me. So.
All right.
Yeah. Lord Almighty. More next week.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the We Would Be Dead podcast. Hit subscribe now to never miss an episode. Rate and review our show on iTunes. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Would Be Dead Pod. And join our Facebook group to discuss the podcast and more.
It was not a bunch of guys fucking. It was a barbershop quartet.